Hook up. I think I've got sound. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I'm running a little bit behind. I was just buttoning up an editing project that I'm digging into. So, let's do this. Good morning. Okay, so this morning we're going to talk a little bit about the Miller Lite situation because Miller Lite looked at Bud Light and said, "Hold my beer." Now in all fairness, well, first let me offer you guys just a little bit of an apology. I started about 2 minutes late there because what happened was I was buttoning up an editing project this morning and I went to send proof for review out to a couple of the clients. And I got confronted by an extra layer of login security by one of my service apps. And I'm sitting here trying to get through that. And then I looked up and was like, oh shit, I'm late. So anyway, Miller, it's going to be, it's getting treated like Miller Lite looked at the amazing and effective backlash of boycott and just, we're not going to buy your beer that Bud Light went through over the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing and said, hold my beer, we're going to screw this up. Now, I'll be fair to Miller Lite, a little more fair than they deserve probably, but in all fairness, the fact is that this particular ad that is now coming to light and probably likely to have backlash at least similar to that Bud Light has suffered after the Dylan Mulvaney fallout. This Miller Lite ad came out several weeks before the Dylan Mulvaney controversy. And that actually says a couple things on its own. The fact is, the Dylan Mulvaney backlash was instantaneous, which actually speaks positively to Dylan Mulvaney individually as a brand. It means that Dylan Mulvaney's brand was big enough that his activity could not go unnoticed for a few hours. And so the second it happened, the whole world said, yeah, well, we're just going to have to drink something else because screw you guys. We're not down for this. Right? We're told over and over and over and over again that the majority of Americans are just on board for this whole transgender ideology thing. And what just happened with Bud Light tells you that that is absolutely not the case. Because contrary to popular belief, it's not just redneck men that drink Bud Light. I mean, guys, come on, it's a light beer. I mean, women drink light beer. That ain't complicated. And funny thing about women, many of them have children that they would prefer not mutilated. And when I say they would prefer not mutilated, understand the accusation is not that there are deranged leftists out there running around trying to attach involuntary axe wounds to your sons against their will. No. Rather, they are subversively attempting to attach a socially contagious psychopathy to your children that will slowly and insidiously make them believe that they have organically arrived on their own at the desire to mutilate their body in order to gain social acceptance. Okay? If you've got a kid that hangs out with people who are figuring out a way to get tattoos before they're 18, then that's a thing that their friends do. Which means that doing that is, at least to some degree, part of the social norm, part of the mores that is expected to be accepted into that peer group. That's just tattoos. The way a social contagion works, especially one that involves invasive, destructive body modification, is that the modification is a part of the social mores. And for such an extreme modification as voluntarily sabotaging your own sexual reproductive future, the ideology has to be extreme to support that maneuver. That is one of the big reasons why the backlash to the Dylan Mulvaney incident was so severe. Because remember, Dylan Mulvaney's target audience are children between the ages of about 10 and 16. That's Mulvaney's primary audience. And the marketing exec that made the Mulvaney thing happen was very clear that a big motivating factor for the experiment to begin with was the need of Bud Light to attract younger drinkers. Now, what they want eventually are drinkers who are of age and have made a habit of buying Bud Light and acquired at least apathetic brand loyalty, where they're in the habit of purchasing that beer instead of thinking about what beer they want to buy. So no, I've already done my thinking. I've made my choice, and now I know that when I go to the shelf, that's what I'm going to go buy. That's the objective, is to create that customer. But you create that customer. We talked about this the other day. We talked about it when I told the story about how I started smoking. When I was pretty young. You hook them when they're young. I mean, that's marketing 101. If there are two things that are dead true in basic marketing 101, hook them while they're young and sex sells. And those two things together, sex sells, and so you sell it to the young people who are still in the early throes of puberty, still explosive little Molotov cocktails of hormonal instability. And what you have done is you have created an unthinking, habitual brand loyalist. That's the objective. Now, these beer companies, Miller Lite, Bud Light, both have very similar target markets, and that target market essentially is the blue collar working man. Ostensibly is the blue collar working man. So let's take a quick look at this ad. And let me remind you, this ad came out before the Dylan Mulvaney thing, in celebration of Women's Month, of International Women's Day. And the sophistry is just galling.
Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer ever.
That right there. Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer ever. Among who? Oh, among all of the people who brewed beer, there were women, which is to say that among all of the people who brewed beer, there were also men. Right? She doesn't even make the claim that the majority of brewers were women originally, which, of course, is not the case. Beer is one of those things that we kind of stumbled across, right? Early nomadic tribes discovered that the wheat that got wet went bad, and then in desperation, and this is soft science, theoretical anthropology type of stuff, but the kind of general consensus assumption on that is that they had wheat that got wet, it went bad, and then when it went bad enough, it became beer. Eventually you get to experimenting with that, but the nomadic tribes that settled down so that they could more easily brew beer to take advantage of some important technological advances there, including, my wife mentions it was medicinal. Yes, there's the painkiller aspect, it's a mild palliative. But more importantly, for the survival of the species, it's an efficient, by early standards, an efficient storage mechanism for wheat, which has a short shelf life. And Danny says, and they noticed that it made them feel good. There is a lot of anthropological theory revolving around the idea that beer is actually the key factor that denomaditized many early tribes. Her statement there, here's a little known fact, women were among the first people to ever make beer. So there were no men? Oh, wait, no, she didn't say that. She didn't actually say that there were no men. But, and I'm going to skip to the end of the commercial for a second, but then, at the end of the commercial, she says this.
Oh, so here's to women, because without us, there would be no beer.
That is pure sophistry and tautology. So we went from some of the people who made beer were women, all the way to if there were no women, there would be no beer. Hold on. Okay. If there were no women, Sunshine, there would be no anybody. Fair? But if we begin with your original premise that among them, that some beer makers were women, that means that not all beer makers were women. So your conclusion here that if there were no women who made beer, there would be no beer, is falsified by your original assertion. You nattering shithead. So I'm going to take this back, and we're going to go through most of the commercial. The whole thing's about a minute and a half. And I'm going to have to stop and pause a couple times because wow, the shit. Oh my God.
From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the...
Women were the ones doing the brewing. Colonial, I'm sorry, have we forgotten about Charlie Mops, as Steve mentions? Have we forgotten about Samuel Adams? Right? There were women who did some brewing. But you see how she immediately jumped from women were among those who did the brewing to they did all of the brewing, which is just patently false. If you can name a not woman who has brewed beer, then her statement is automatically false. Or are there hats? Obviously. Are there humans? The category exists because it describes a thing which exists. So, yeah, Sergeant Major mentions Friar Tuck. Hell yeah. well, well, how about Rabbi Tuckman? There are things here. There are rocks. There are trees. There are squirrels. We'll bless them all until we get verschnicket. If you don't get that reference, you need to go. You need to go get you some Mel Brooks. So,
Founding mothers of beer, they put us in bikinis.
Yes, yes. They put us in bikinis. I already covered the sex cells. Now, Sunshine, were you put in bikini at gunpoint? Or were you offered, hey, dudes like to look at girls in bikinis and they like to buy beer. We'll pay you an astronomical amount of money to wear a bikini in front of a camera. Or you could not earn an astronomical amount of money for doing no work. Okay, there's a gender pay gap for you. How many men get paid astronomical sums of money to stand in front of a camera and look sexy? They exist. There are men who do that job. But it's 10 to 1 women. And that is a very high-paying, low-skill profession. Very high-paying, very low-skill. Fee mentions Chippendales. Yeah, and dude strippers, they exist. At a ratio substantially less than there are female strippers, and at a lower earning margin. They don't make as much money. I actually, funny story, I actually knew a guy that was a male stripper. He owned a construction company. I worked for him one summer in 97. In the construction business. That was back when we were staying at the lake house while we were moving to Georgia, and I would paddle the canoe, throw my tool bag and paddle my canoe to work on the lake and build docks and boathouses. And he said he made pretty good money stripping, but he still owned a construction business that he ran during the day. Right? Okay, so yeah, maybe he made pretty good money stripping, but it clearly wasn't enough for him to say this is worth doing exclusively and not having another profession. Go find you some female strippers and ask them, what's your other job? I bet you it's not building docks.
Wow. Look at this wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their but the whole beer industry's Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all.
So now women need reparations. That's what she's telling you there. Because the billions of dollars that have been paid to models by beer companies was just not sufficient.
This and buying it back so that they can turn it into good for women brewers. Literally good. How, you ask? Ladies, take it away.
First, we turn the bad into compost. Then we feed compost to worms. Push out beautiful fertilizer.
That good helps farmers grow quality hops.
Okay, and now here's the other thing that I really want to cover. The ad campaign, it's not just an ad campaign, it's an activist campaign. They're taking old beer advertising material and turning it into compost to grow hops to make beer. I recommend to you that if you notice a small microbrewery that is woman-owned, you should boycott that brewery immediately, and not for any political reason, but for your health. Because what they've just explained to you is that they're taking these chemically treated, bleached paper, glossy posters and composting that mess of chemical cancer and using that to make the beer that they're going to sell. So unless you see a woman-owned brewery that has a big sign out front that says, "We know better than to feed you ground up posters," or something like, "There's no ink in our beer," right? I'll refer you to Sweeney Todd. What is this? Smells like piss, right? It smells like it's piss and ink. You should, until these women disavow Miller Lite and this campaign and say we absolutely use high quality natural fertilizers. We do not make our beer with piss and ink. Boycott all women brewers until you know that they're not making their beer with piss and ink. I mean, if that's your thing, if you want to get a bottle of piss and ink and rub it on your scalp, see how that works out, I wish you the best of luck. But for me and mine, we will be taking a hard pass on all woman-owned brewed beers until I know what fertilizer their hops were grown in. And that's some shit that I don't want to have to think about, by the way. Right? And that's a big part of why I'm saying all. Yes, all. Because I'm not going to waste my time researching your bad methods when the information I have is that some large number, it's about 300 apparently, is how many woman-owned microbreweries are getting the good shit from Miller Lite. That's enough, right? If I have 4 cyanide M&Ms in my bag of 1,000, I will have Reese's Pieces, right? I'm not taking the risk. That's stupid. So, the other thing to take away from this is Miller is just straight up attacking men. It didn't work out for Gillette. It didn't work out for Bud Light. Right? It didn't work out for Hershey's. It's not going to work out for Miller Lite. And I think that's hilarious. Unfortunately, once again, or maybe fortunately, I am not going to have a large impact with my dollars on this particular controversy because, quite simply, I don't drink light beer. I just don't. I like a beer I can chew. So, that's going to be the end of that conversation for me. But if Miller Lite was your go-to to replace Bud Light in protest against the Dylan Mulvaney situation, might I suggest a Yingling? In fact, I'd go so far as to say the Yingling Black and Tan. I rather like the Yingling Black and Tan when it's the available option. Or, and this is an adventure, find yourself a growler bar. They're great. You go in, there's a wall of taps, you sit down at the little bar, you buy a flight, and they put down a half a dozen or so 2-ounce shots of beer, from up and down the taps. A flight is almost never everything the growler bar offers. These are the sours, these are the stouts, et cetera, et cetera. So, go in, get you a flight of sours, for example, and try the sours, and then buy a growler of it. Get what you like. Just stay away from the light beer. And more, as more large companies go further and further woke, I always want to say shop local, keep your money as close to home as possible. I have a hard time with that because of where I live. I have a lot of problems with my tax dollars going to my local government but that's a whole nother problem. But shopping local is a good practice. And if there's not a brewer in your community, maybe find one nearby. The Viking Alchemist Mead Pub. I think it's the Viking Alchemist. I've only been there once. I was very impressed with their offerings. I believe they're in Roswell, Georgia. But going in there for a glass of mead is fantastic. And that's shopping local. That's keeping it relatively local. And I was telling the guys, I want to open myself a meadery, and just like most meaderies, we'll serve the mead in the bull's horn chalices, and we'll appropriate a familiar logo to rapidly expand brand recognition. It will be called the Horn Pub. Yeah. So I'm going to leave you guys with that one. I need to get going. Thanks for watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.